100% honest with you, this is probably going to be kind of a short rumination because I don't have much to talk about. I know. Some people are like, oh, your ruminations are short. But, whatever. What's funny is when I looked into this episode a bit, I saw a couple of interviews and a couple of the other sites that I track just to kind of get a generic how do they feel about the episode feel. A feel about how they feel, if you feel me. And a lot of people were praising this episode. Now, Lord knows I've been wrong more than once, and I have been happy to admit when I'm wrong. Well, I shouldn't say happy. I have been willing to admit I'm wrong when I go back through stuff, and it's like, oh, I like this. Like, Season 7 so far has been like, oh, this is amazing. But when I look back and think about this episode, my first reaction, like, I almost always have a gut reaction as soon as I look at an episode I'm about to look at. It's like, ugh, or ah, or eh, or huh? Something like that. In this case, it was one of those, ugh, because I don't remember liking this episode that much. And as I'm going through the episode, I'm like, I don't understand why. Why didn't I like this episode? Why does this piss me off so much? And then I got to about the last 2 minutes, and I was like, oh, that's why. There's also some bad writing on display here. See, this is a perfect example of one of the reasons why I dislike the A-plot, B-plot format. Stuff like this and the episode The Swarm back in Season 3, both of which had an engaging and interesting character plot and have a immensely disinteresting ship is in danger plot. In fact, I decided, rather than rant about that yet again, I was going to do something a little bit different this time. I was going to write down every note I had about the ship is in danger plot. I have one note written down. One. And that note is, the very idea of a subspace weapons range is admittedly kind of interesting in its own right, but it puts into my mind the idea of a people who literally fire weapons basically through the underspace, through subspace, whatever I want to call it, through hyperspace, and those weapons then emerge and destroy things with immense devastating potential. Who fires these things? And, like, if these people have this kind of power and technology as far as weapons development, why aren't they the dominant species of the quadrant, And then I was like, oh, of course, it's the Voth! Anyways, or maybe it's the Iconians, I don't frickin' know. But that's it, that's all I've got. I have nothing else to say about the B-plot. It's so boring. It only intersects with the A-plot in one way, which is another reason why I relate it to The Swarm, because The Swarm interacted with the main plot in one small way, as it kind of interceded right in the middle there. And that's the fact that Seven was actively being negligent in her duties as a result of this. Now that actually makes sense, and is logical, and helps to supplement to supplement the A-plot of Seven. And that works, even. See, it is logical that we, being grown adults who have spent most of our lives being and becoming who we are, understand the concept of balance. Now, I know, the joke is, of course, it's not even really a joke. There are people out there who don't know this. I know grown adults who still haven't figured out stuff that many people have figured out as a kid. But we still have the ability to understand that concept of balance, having had years of experience with it. However, Seven has not. Seven is just beginning having recreation time and, doing things that are not involving her specific duties and responsibilities. And so all of a sudden, she's dealing with these things that she likes to do, hobbies, basically, and she doesn't know where that balance point is. And showing that by literally having the ship in danger while she is negligent on that makes a degree of sense, really. Because she hasn't understood that. This would be a good way to shock her back into that. Or shock her too far, for that matter. It's one of the reasons why I like the fact that the Doctor has that speech afterwards when he talks to her. This is actually a couple scenes later. When he's like, no, this is natural. You should have things that distract you from your job. You just need to find the balance point, like I was just talking about. And I like that. That's good. You don't need the entire rest of the filler of the episode of the B-plot to make that work, though. It's so disinteresting that I literally... This is not a joke. I'm sitting here, just like this, watching the episode. And I'm like, I was doing... I was like engaging my mind the whole time, trying to come up with something. Like, one of the things I've talked about before is how much I wish I could do these ruminations live. Have the episode right back here on the green screen. I'd probably shrink myself so I'm not blocking more of the episode. And have me talking about it as it happens with you, right? I'd love to do that, but copyright gets in the way. So, and yes, I know there's a couple of ways to make that happen, but they're kind of a hassle, and I don't want to shift gears on that just right now. But I was thinking about it as we were going through the episode, and during these B-plot filler sections, I'm like, all right, picture you have a live audience, Arsh, or Lore. Picture that there's people right there listening to you right now. How do you respond to this? What do you say? What do you do? I couldn't come up with anything. That is pretty much the definition of filler as far as I'm concerned. Doesn't add anything, doesn't produce anything, doesn't invoke thought, it wasn't enjoyable, it was flat out boring, it doesn't add anything to any of the 5 points of character, nor did it fill that integral central point, which is in just sheer enjoyment regardless of story. Anyways, that's probably half of the reason why I remember this episode so poorly. But even that I was willing to accept. Because it actually gets a lot less screen time than the A-plot, which is all about Seven and, well, let me say that the teaser of this episode was really good. There's someone playing music, and then we cut up and it's Seven. It's another one of those teasers that only works with context, like the one I posited that they didn't actually do with the Klingon D7. You remember that? The idea of we, the audience, can be more engaged in this because we know what we're looking at. And so, for example, to see Seven out of uniform, to see her with her hair down, to see her playing music, all of those things speak to us because we know the character and we know the setting. So now it's like, what's going on? What's changed? It was a very effective teaser, especially for an episode which is ultimately entirely about her. Filler aside. The metronome is such an obvious aspect of symbolism. I'm actually sad that Chakotay had to have that whole, Holo Chakotay had to have that whole speech flat out saying, this is what the metronome is to you, Seven, and laying it right out there, because of course that's what the metronome is to her. But I do think that despite the fact that they shove it into your face, it is still an effective form of symbolism. Because that is Seven's problem right now in a nutshell. She's got that metronome, and that beat, and everything is nice and orderly, and everything else is determinate upon and flows from that rhythm. And she does not know how to do elsewise. In fact, that's kind of the point of this, really. See, that's the thing. Some people think this is about her trying to break the metronome. That's not true at all. This episode is her acting along her metronome. I don't mean with regards to always being a robot Borg. There's a great scene that helps to illustrate my point. It's when she approaches B'Elanna in the warp core and gives her a gift for the baby shower. That happens in reality, so it's not a hologram piece. It's really obvious which scenes are holodeck and which scenes are not. So she gives that to her, and the way she acts isn't quite as natural and fluid and, well, human as she does on the holodeck, but it is a clear example of reaching out and trying to interact with someone on a personal level to acknowledge the significance thereof. It is the closest thing to real social interaction Seven gets to right about now. That helps make my point so well, because that's the point. Seven is reaching out. Seven is trying to go out and do things according to the way that she is patterned, according to that rhythm. This rhythm is actually the wrong word. I keep using that. Beat is actually the word I want to use. According to the beat that is being presented. I suppose rhythm could work, but you know what I mean. So then we show some holodeck scenes, and I only have a couple notes about those. First of all, I like the way Neelix interacts with her in the holodeck. Even though he's a little overbearing, the rest of what he says is nice. You know, curtains, examining this, make it you, you know. That even pays off later. The doc flat out says, you know, that you have an excellent sense and taste. Those quarters were very you. Then, of course, the fact that she has no uniform and the fact that she doesn't have to sleep in the alcove anymore. Patterned based on the next logical progression. And finally, choosing Chakotay as a romantic entanglement. Now, what's funny is the episode itself flat out asks the question, why Chakotay? Because there's nothing leading up to that whatsoever. And, let's be clear, there isn't. Let's just lay that out, okay? I know there's lots of shippers out there, and I mean no offense to any of them, but the Chakotay 7 thing came out of flippin' nowhere. And yes, that's one of my grievances with Endgame as well, if I'm being blunt. So, why Chakotay? Some people have tried to wrap their minds around it or look at it from a different perspective. I give you 2 answers, my own answers to that question. Answer number 1, the out-of-character answer. Who can they give a romance plot to, as far as the main cast members? Well, logically speaking, they can't give it to the ones... They shouldn't give it to the ones who are already entangled or are people who get romance plots semi-regularly. So that's out. That just leaves Chakotay. I'm serious, if you think about it. He's basically the only one left, unless you count frickin' Seska, which I don't. Or, Timescape, or whatever it was, which I also don't. He is basically the only choice from an out-of-character perspective of, like... Okay, I'll do this sometimes as a writer. I'll sit down and write a situation before I write the characters. And then I will affix that situation to existing characters based on who hasn't done what, or who has done this, or, you know, what have you, right? So that's kind of what I think happened here. They were like, okay, 7 and... Harry? No, we already did that. Tom? He's frickin' married. Tuvok? No, he's not going to be disloyal to his wife. Okay, Chakotay. Boom, there we go. In character, though, I do have another answer for that. The Chakotay we rarely see is a strong, decisive, intelligent, militarily minded commander. And I've been pointing that out every time he really gets to shine. My opinion, I think that's one of the types of personalities that would appeal to 7, personally. I think that he's the kind of person, you know, someone who is so decisive, someone who is so assertive. He's got that alpha male thing going about him, but not in a obnoxious or overbearing kind of a way. Just in, this is how it's going to happen, and therefore it happens this way kind of a way. And I think she would like that kind of a personality, because she herself is kind of that way, actually. I'm just going to point out, though, that they are missing the obvious choice here, which is the frickin' Doctor. I know I've pointed this out before, and I don't want to come across as if I'm shipping, but if I was in the writer's room, and they came out and they were like, all right, we need to debate, you know, we need to pair up 7 with someone. The Doctor is such an obvious choice to me, I am amazed they didn't pursue that one. It's not like you can't have holographic and flesh characters be romantically entangled, and they have done this before, sort of, and they will definitely do this in the future, so I'm not sure why this is an issue here. I also think that the Doctor is a near-perfect pair for her. If for absolutely no other reason, then he is someone who can truly empathize and not merely sympathize with her. He has been where she has been, in many ways, understands the feelings of loneliness, ostracization, I think is what I was going for there, and wouldn't judge her, doesn't judge her, is probably the only crew member who never judged her, who is understanding and kind and caring and does actually like her, and I mean as a friend as well as romantically. Oh, also he's already had interest in her while we're on the subject. It's such an obvious choice, I am actually curious why they didn't go with it. Let's talk about the reality, though, here. Because it's not about shipping and it's not about romance. Not really, even though I've got my usual romantic, feely background going for today. Notice how much more comfortable she is on the holodeck. How much more smooth. There's no hesitation. There's no clipped tones. She speaks like that because she is uncomfortable in social circumstances. Because she still isn't fully comprehending how to interact with other people on a normal level. She's getting there. Remember, she did it with B'Elanna in this episode. But she still does things like, for example, say, proceed, as if it was a command. And she's saying that because she doesn't know what else to say. Because she is so uncomfortable in a situation she does not fully understand and has no control over. Just like Barclay. I really like Barclay. If it's not obvious. He is an amazing character, and I think Dwight Schultz is a fantastic actor. One of the things he nailed about Barclay was that feeling of he's so different on the holodeck because he knows what he's doing there and he's in control. You can't tell me you wouldn't have a similar reaction. I mean, really, you know. It's one of the age-old things, actually. The holodeck is, of course, a much more advanced concept of this, but we tend to be different in our imaginations, or in our fantasies, or in our books, or in like video games, or cosplay, or whatever practice, basically, than we are in the real thing. And when we get to the real thing, well, it's a little different, isn't it? Hell, Wing Commander 3, I think, even made a plot point about that. A small plot point, a character point, really. So I see Seven here, and I actually feel for her, because what she's going through is effectively the same general problem that was going through anybody who has those kind of social anxiety issues. She is dealing with it in a different manner. You know, the dominant, the gray slate that she slams down in front of her, this mask that she wears of this dominating, you know, just go, proceed! But all that's doing is hiding someone who has no idea what they're doing. And it's so obvious. In the end of the episode, she flat out runs from the possibility of having to deal with that ever again. Just like Franklin does over on Babylon 5. She flees from it, even though it is not, in many ways, the right choice. She would rather be a slave to Borg technology than once again face the reality of having to be in contact with things that she just can't deal with, that she doesn't understand, and that she doesn't control. Now, that being said, even though they flat out call out in this episode that this happened as a result of Unimatrix Zero, I think this should have happened earlier. That's building up and leading to one of the reasons I still kind of at this episode. Even now, I still do. Even though there is a good A-plot here, and there's some good character stuff for Seven, and there really is, I still kind of at it, because why now? Why not like forever ago? This is Voyager, okay? Seven's been on the ship for about 3.5, I think, years at this point, something like that. And they've been doing this, her getting more human, well, I shouldn't say more human, her becoming more of a person, and then pulling back, and her becoming more of a person and pulling back thing quite a few times. I've even called out when she would arbitrarily suddenly act like she was a couple of episodes or seasons ago in terms of her personality and her perspective. So why have this revelation now in season frickin' 7? Also, if I may, Icheb really should have picked up on this earlier. I'm a little amazed he didn't, actually. Icheb is smart, knows where she's coming from to some extent or another, and knows her quite well. And it takes him a while to pick up on it, and even then he doesn't actually get it. Also, I like how it's interesting she literally refuses to inform Janeway about this. Because, and I think, this is just interpretation, of course, but I don't think it's because of pride. Although Seven does have a lot of pride. I think in this case it's more because of fear. Because to admit that she's slamming this mask down in front of everyone, to admit she's trying to circumvent it, to admit she's trying to escape, to deal with things in her own way, is just something she can't stand the thought of any more than the thought of actually going and, for example, attending that baby shower. You can tell she wanted to, on some level or another. And that's one of the really tragic parts. How many of you out there either yourself or know someone who has social anxiety issues? Now, how many of you out there with that social anxiety problem want to have social interactions, but basically can't because of the anxiety? And you can kind of see where Seven's coming from here on this perspective. Now, don't mistake me. I'm with Janeway on this one. As weird as that sounds. In an emergency situation, with a red alert, with things being as bad as they are, she needed her to be at her comm station so that the situation could be dealt with. They were actually under threat of destruction as a result of her negligence. However, that does not in any way mean that I am dismissing the reality that Seven was not wanting to admit what she was going through with Janeway. I do find it interesting that she only admits it to the Doctor under A, the fact that he found out on his own frickin' time, and B, Doctor-patient confidentiality. And that brings me to one other thing I just got to make fun of. Heavy damage? I mean, we've seen Voyager get knocked around left and right, and consoles blowing up, and calling out the shield numbers, and yet we see them just basically the energy waves just kind of wash over Voyager, and they call that heavy damage. Give me a break. And now we get to the reason why this episode pisses me off. And that's because of the fact that they slammed the reset button right at the end. This would be a great... Well, that's not true. This would be half of a great episode. So a good episode overall if they didn't slam the reset button right at the end. And that's why I still groan at this one even now, even despite the quality of the character moments. Because, damn it, it's not just about continuity. You guys know I'm a huge continuity hound. You know that I prefer things to matter. I just talked about this in my previous episode, talking about workforce. But that's not what I'm talking about, although it is partially involved. What I really want to bring to the forethought is the fact that the character is growing and then just slams back down to level 0. It's a form of teasing, which I actually I can't stand it. I despise it when television's like, maybe this one, no. Maybe, no, we're not going to do it. And for God's sakes, it's Season 7, as I just mentioned. This is a 3.5-year-old character or so. Why not have real character growth like they already have? Why slam the reset button? Have her agree to the surgery. Have it be a difficult process. Have it be some kind of aspect of her moving forward and being able to experience emotions on a stronger level as a result of the fact that she decided to take this difficult choice and try to make one hesitant, careful step forward with the aid of the doctor and her friends. Why not do that? But I digress. Anyways, apologies for the noise. I will be seeing you guys at the next episode.